In a high-stakes maritime showdown, the U.S. military confirmed it has seized control of a Russian-flagged oil tanker in the North Atlantic, an operation driven by alleged sanctions violations and carried out after weeks of silent surveillance and relentless pursuit across open seas. The vessel, MV Bella 1, also known as the Marinera, was seized under the authority of a warrant issued by a U.S. federal court, according to a statement by the U.S. Army's European Command. EUCOM said the tanker was intercepted after being tracked by the U.S. Coast Guard cutter Monroe, with the operation carried out in coordination with the U.S. Justice Department, the Department of Homeland Security, and the newly renamed Department of War, formerly known as the Department of Defense. The command confirmed the seizure took place in international waters in the North Atlantic. U.S. officials say the Marinera is part of a so-called shadow fleet used to transport oil for sanctioned states, including Venezuela, Russia, and Iran. The tanker had reportedly evaded earlier attempts by the U.S. Coast Guard to board it in December, while it was operating in the Caribbean, and later crossed into the Atlantic Ocean. According to Reuters, the ship had slipped through a broader U.S. maritime blockade, targeting vessels carrying sanctioned Venezuelan oil. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth underscored the administration's stance in a social media post, writing that the blockade of sanctioned and illicit Venezuelan oil remains in full effect anywhere in the world. Two U.S. officials told Reuters that both the Coast Guard and the U.S. military were directly involved in Wednesday's seizure. Russian state broadcaster RT reported that American forces boarded the vessel using a helicopter, publishing images of the aircraft hovering above the tanker. RT cited an unnamed source who said the ship had been shadowed by a U.S. Coast Guard vessel for weeks, and that at least one earlier attempt to intercept it was disrupted by severe weather conditions. As the operation unfolded, marine traffic data showed the Marinera edging closer to Iceland's exclusive economic zone, heightening the stakes by the hour. Reuters later reported that a Russian submarine and a naval warship were operating nearby, an ominous backdrop to the seizure, even as both sides stopped short of direct confrontation. Speaking from Moscow, journalist Dmitry Medvedenko described the pursuit as a prolonged cat-and-mouse game, noting that there had been multiple failed attempts to seize the tanker in recent weeks. The Russian government has not confirmed whether it deployed naval assets to escort the vessel, but Russia's foreign ministry said it was closely monitoring the situation. The ministry, quoted by Russian state media, argued that the tanker was operating lawfully in international waters and accused the U.S. and NATO of paying disproportionate attention to what it described as a civil vessel. Moscow called on Western nations to respect freedom of navigation under international maritime law. The Marinera was sanctioned by Washington in 2024 for allegedly transporting oil on behalf of a company linked to Lebanon-based Hezbollah. U.S. authorities say the seizure is part of a wider crackdown ordered by President Donald Trump on vessels connected to Venezuelan oil exports. Separately, U.S. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem announced that American forces also seized a second vessel, the Panama-flagged supertanker M. Sophia, in international waters near the Caribbean. Reuters reported that the ship had departed Venezuelan waters earlier this year and was operating with its transponder turned off while carrying oil toward China. Reporting from Washington, Al Jazeera correspondent Kimberly Hallcat described the dual seizures as a significant escalation, saying they signal a coordinated effort to intercept and detain multiple sanctioned vessels operating far beyond U.S. territorial waters.
As Washington moves to reshape Venezuela's oil future, an unexpected winner is emerging: Russia. New maritime intelligence shows Moscow quietly expanding its grip over the global shadow fleet, just as the United States ramps up enforcement against sanctioned Venezuelan crude. According to Lloyd's List, there has been a sharp acceleration in oil tankers switching their flag of registration to Russia, a move widely seen as an attempt to gain protection from U.S. seizures. In December alone, 17 sanctioned vessels abandoned fraudulent registries and reflagged under the Russian banner. At the center of this shift is a tanker once known as Bella 1. The ship was intercepted by U.S. authorities on December 20th while en route to Venezuela to load sanctioned oil. At the time, it was sailing under a fake Guyana flag. Days later, Russia notified Washington that the vessel had changed its name, now Marinera, and switched its registration to Russia, mid-voyage. Tracking data shows the tanker has since left the Caribbean and is now near Iceland, heading toward Russian waters. Lloyd's List says the timing was no coincidence. This was an attempt to place the ship under Moscow's protection, beyond the reach of U.S. enforcement. And it wasn't alone. Another sanctioned tanker, now called Hyperion, reflagged to Russia just days later. That ship had previously delivered Russian naphtha, a key chemical used to thin Venezuela's heavy crude, allowing it to be exported despite sanctions. Despite a growing U.S. naval presence, the vessel exited Venezuelan waters untouched. Experts say the message is clear. As Washington tightens pressure, Russia is absorbing risk and gaining leverage. President Donald Trump has said U.S. oil giants will invest billions into Venezuela's energy sector following Nicolás Maduro's overthrow, with Chevron, ExxonMobil, and ConocoPhillips preparing talks with the administration. But analysts warn the enforcement push is producing unintended consequences. More than 40 Shadow Fleet vessels have now registered under Russia since June. Globally, over 12% of the world's tanker fleet is operating outside traditional insurance and regulatory systems. Many of these ships are aging, uninsured, and invisible until something goes wrong. Lloyd's List warns a major spill involving one of these tankers would raise a chilling question: who pays for the cleanup? As Russian-flagged vessels pass through NATO waters, often under false identities, a deeper challenge looms. Will the United States be willing to intercept a Russian-flagged tanker? Because if not, Moscow's shadow fleet may soon become a permanent feature of global oil trade, protected, emboldened, and operating in plain sight. And as oil flows, so does power.
The United States has captured Venezuela's president in a midnight raid, and now Donald Trump says America is taking its oil. As Caracas counts its dead, Washington counts barrels. 30 to 50 million barrels of Venezuelan crude headed straight to American ports at market price under presidential control. This is no longer diplomacy. This is power politics, live and raw. President Donald Trump announced Tuesday that Venezuela's so-called interim authorities will supply the United States with between 30 million and 50 million barrels of high-quality oil. The oil, Trump said on Truth Social, will be loaded onto storage ships and delivered directly to U.S. unloading docks. Trump added that the revenue from the oil would be controlled by him as president and used to benefit both the American and Venezuelan people. Trump has doubled down, saying his administration will now run Venezuela policy and push its leaders to open vast oil reserves to American energy companies. The White House is now organizing an Oval Office meeting with executives from Exxon, Chevron, and ConocoPhillips to discuss Venezuela's future energy landscape. Trump has also dismissed Democratic criticism of the raid, arguing both parties long agreed Maduro was illegitimate. Speaking at a House Republican retreat, Trump complained Democrats refused to credit him for what he called a successful operation.